Yeah, listen. Some people will never forgive you for what they did to you. Facts, facts, facts. Na, 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 na.
Here's a story almost everyone has lived through in some form. You are minding your own business. You're not hurting anyone. You are just living, and somehow, somewhere, a version of you starts circulating that you don't recognize. Someone says you are fake. Someone says your success isn't real. Someone says you don't deserve what you have. And by the time it gets back to you, it traveled through 5 mouths and picked up details that never happened. You sit there thinking, I didn't do anything to these people. Why am I the topic? Today I want to talk about that specific kind of pain, the pain of being talked about, misjudged, and quietly worked against by people who, on the surface, might have even smiled at you. And more importantly, I want to talk about what actually happens to people who do that and what happens to you if you handle it right. Because there's a patterns here that shows up again and again in human behavior. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It goes something like this. Someone feels threatened by you. They act on that feeling in some quiet, indirect way. And months or years later, the thing they built to bring you down becomes the very things that exposes who they really are. Let's get into it.
I don't carry hate, I carry lessons. There's a difference. One keeps you.
Let's start with the uncomfortable question. Why do people go out their way to talk badly about someone who isn't bothering them? There's a concept in psychology called social comparison theory. Basically, human beings constantly measure themselves against the people around them, consciously or not. When someone sees another person doing well, building something, staying calm under pressure, or simply being content, and they themselves feel stuck, envious, or insecure, that gap creates discomfort. And discomfort demands relief. There are 2 healthy ways to resolve that discomfort. Admire the person and let it motivate you, or turn inward and work on your own life. But there's a third, much less healthy way, and it's incredibly common. You shrink the other person down, you find something to criticize, you spread a story that makes them look less impressive, less genuine, less deserving. Psychologists sometimes call this downward social comparison, deliberately or unconsciously making someone else look worse so the gap between you feels smaller. It's not really about you. It's about them managing a feeling they don't know how to sit with. And here's the part that matters most. People who are secure in themselves don't need to do this. If someone is genuinely at peace with their own life, your success doesn't threaten them. It doesn't register as a comparison at all. So when you notice a group of people who seem obsessed with your business, your choices, your relationships, that obsession is information. It's telling you far more about their internal state than it is telling you anything true about you.
Then I realize loyalty means nothing without respect.
Let's zoom in on the mechanism itself. Because gossip is a strange social tool. On the surface, it looks like harmless conversation. Underneath, it's often doing something very specific, building alliances at someone else's expense. Researchers who study group dynamics have found that gossip serves a real social function. It can build trust between the people gossiping because sharing secret information creates a sense of closeness. The tragic irony is that this closeness is being built on someone else's back, the people gossiping about you might be growing closer to each other in the process, bonding over a shared narrative that paints you as the villain. This explains something that probably feels familiar. It's really just one person. It is a small cluster, a group chat, a circle of friends who all start repeating the same lines about you, almost like they rehearsed it. That's because, in a way, they did not intentionally, but through repetition. One person says something, another agrees to stay in the group, gets grace. A third adds a detail to seem in the know, and suddenly there's a shared story that nobody actually fact checked. Here's the thing that about stories built this way. They're fragile. They are built on assumption, projection, and repetition, not on truth. And stories built on sand don't hold forever, especially on life give people evidence that contradict the narrative they've been telling.
I was born to become who I was created to be. Amen.
This is where it gets interesting because this is usually where the shift happens. Let's say a group of people spend months, maybe years, telling a story about you. That you are fake, that you won't make it, that your calm is an act, that your success is temporary or undeserved. They needed that story to be true because it justified how they treated you. But life doesn't really care what story people tell. It just keeps unfolding. And if you keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep being consistent, the actual evidence starts contradicting the narrative. You didn't fall apart. You didn't fail. You didn't become who they said you were. Instead, you kept building, you kept growing, kept being decent to people, even the one who weren't decent to you. This creates something psychologists call cognitive dissonance in the people who spread the story. A very uncomfortable internal conflict between the story I told about this person and the reality I am now seeing. Most people resolve dissonance in one of two ways. They either admit they were wrong, which is hard and humbling, or they double down, which usually makes them look even more unreasonable over time. Either way, something shifts. If they admit it, you often see it in small, quiet ways. A message out of nowhere, a strange apology, someone suddenly being nicer for no clear vision. If they double down, they usually end up isolated in their own narrative while everyone else around them start to notice the gap between what they said about you and what they're actually saying. This is, in plain terms, what people often call the truth coming out. It's not mystical. It's just what happens when a full story meets enough real-world contradiction.
Proving who I am, rich in freedom. That's the plan. And I don't need a million followers.
Now, let's talk about you, the person on the receiving ends of all this, because staying grounded while people talk about you is genuinely one of the hardest emotional skills a person can develop. When you are being misjudged, there's a strong pull to defend yourself loudly, to confront every rumor, to make sure everyone knows the truth. That instinct makes sense. It comes from a very old, very human need to protect your reputation, because for most of the human story, reputation actually determines survival, access to community, resources, safety. But here's what a lot of people learn the hard way, including me. Constantly defending yourself against people who've already decided the story rarely changes their mind. It usually just feeds the story, give it more oxygen, more content to talk about. The people spreading it get to say, see, look how upset they got, and use your very real human reaction as more evidence for their narrative. What actually works, even though it's much harder, is staying consistent, not cold, not silent out of fear, but simply steady. Continuing to be who you actually are, continuing to do good work, continuing to treat people decently, even the ones who don't deserve it. This is sometimes called maintaining your integrity under pressure, and it's one of the strongest forms of self-respect there is, because it means your behavior isn't being dictated by other people's opinions of you. There's a quieter kind of power in this. When you don't take the bait, when you don't turn into someone's version of you, you deny them the reaction they were hoping to provoke. And over time, that consistency becomes its own kind of proof. People watching from the sidelines, and there are always people watching from the sidelines, still to notice who's actually behaving with integrity and who's the one causing harm.
Through every fear, nobody knows why you survive.
Let me walk you through an example, a composite of situation I think a lot of people will recognize. Picture someone who built something meaningful, a business, a stable home, a healthy version of themselves after a hard chapter in their life. Along the way, a small group of people around them, maybe your old friends, maybe even family, started feeling uncomfortable watching that growth. Instead of asking themselves why, they started talking, saying the person changed for the worse, saying their success wasn't earned, saying their calm was fake. That surely something was wrong behind closed door. The person hears bits and pieces of this, the way you always eventually do. The first instinct is hurt, followed by anger, followed by the urge to confront every single person and set the record straight. But instead, they choose something different. They keep building, they keep showing up for the people who actually matter to them. They stop trying to convince the ones who've already made up their minds. Month pass, then a year, and slowly something shifts. Not because the person did anything different, but because their life kept being their life, consistently in front of everyone. Eventually, one of the people who spread that story reaches out, not with a dramatic confession, just a quiet, "Hey, I've been thinking, I think I misjudged you back then." Not because a higher power intervened, but because time and consistency did what arguing never could. They let the truth accumulate evidence. This is the real version of that oddly satisfying feeling people describe by watching karma work. It's not magic. It is just what tends to happen when one person keeps building an honest life and the people who doubted them keep running into the same reality over and over until it becomes impossible to ignore.
Means loyalty. Not every smile hides good intentions. Some only love your potential.
I want to spend some real time on one idea because I think it's the single most useful tool in this entire conversation. Emotional detachment from people who have shown you who they are. Detachment doesn't mean not caring at all. And it definitely doesn't mean becoming bitter or cold. I mean, something much more precise. It means you stop giving someone the power to determine your mood, your choices, or your sense of self-worth. Here's a mental model that helps, and it helps me a lot. Imagine every relationship has a kind of investment account. You put in trust, time, emotional energy. A healthy relationship gives you a return, support, honesty, warmth. An unhealthy one just keep taking withdrawals no matter how much you deposit. At some point, continuing to invest in that account isn't loyalty. It's just a loss you keep choosing to take. People who successfully detach from toxic dynamics tend to do a few specific things. They stop trying to be understood by people who have already decided not to understand them. They stop explaining themselves to people who aren't actually listening, only waiting for their turn to talk. And they redirect all of that save energy toward the relationships and goals that actually deserve it. This is incredibly hard in the moment, I know, because part of us always want closure, wants the other person to admit they were wrong, wants an apology that ties everything up neatly. But real life rarely hands you that on schedule. Sometimes the apology comes years later, sometimes it never comes at all. And the people who do best emotionally are the ones who learn to be okay either way because their peace was never actually dependent on someone else's admission of guilt.
Because your future isn't decided by where you started.
Let's talk about what actually tends to happen over time to people who build a habit of tearing others down. This isn't a threat, and it's not wishful thinking. It's just a pattern that shows up consistently in human relationships. People who gossip, undermine, or work against others as a way of managing their own insecurity rarely find peace by doing it. The discomfort that made them act that way in the first place doesn't disappear once they've spread a rumor. If anything, it gets reinforced because now they are emotionally invested in your feeling, in you proving them right. And life doesn't usually cooperate with that kind of wish. There's also a slower social consequence that's easy to underestimate. People notice patterns, maybe not immediately, but eventually. Someone who consistently talks badly about others, who seems to need someone to look down on in order to feel okay about themselves, tend to develop a reputation on their own, one that has nothing to do with what they say about other people and everything to do with how they make people feel when they are in the room. Meanwhile, the person who stayed consistent, who didn't stoop to the same tactic, who kept building instead of retaliating, that person's reputation tends to solidify in the opposite direction. Not because they fought for it, but simply because their behavior over time told a clearer, more consistent story than anything anyone said about them. This is really what people mean in simple terms when they talk about what goes around come around. It's not some cosmic ledger being balanced. It's the natural observable outcome of two different ways of moving through the world. One built on tearing others down to feel bigger, and one built on steady self-respect. Over enough time, those two paths tends to lead to very different places.
Amen. The people who believed in me didn't just save my spirit.
So let's make this practical, because inside without action doesn't help much at 11 p.m. when you're replaying a conversation in your head for the 10th time. First, resist the urge to correct every version of the story. You will not out-argue people who have already decided what they believe about you. Save that energy. Second, keep a short list, literally, if it helps, of the people whose opinion actually matter to you, based on how they've shown up for you, not on how loud they are. Let everyone else's opinion carry proportionally less weight. Third, keep building. Whatever you were doing before the noise started, your work, your goals, your healing, keep doing it. Consistency is the only response gossip has no good answer for. And fourth, follow yourself to feel the hurt without letting it turn into identity. It's completely human to be wounded by unfair treatment. The goal isn't to become numb, It's to feel it, process it, and not let it convince you that you are actually the things they say. Fifth, and maybe the hardest, let go of needing a specific outcome from the people who hurt you. You don't need them to apologize for your life to move forward. If an apology comes, take it graciously if it feels genuine. If it doesn't come, your life still gets to be good.
Every battle deserves your voice. Some people.
Here's where I want to leave you. At some point, the people who spend so much time talking about you will simply become less relevant to your life. Not because you defeated them, but because your attention moved somewhere better. You will be too busy living the life you actually built to keep tabs on what they think or say. And if somewhere down the line, one of them reaches out, feeling a little smaller, a little more honest, maybe even sorry, you get to decide calmly from a place of security instead of vindication what you want to do with that. You don't owe anyone a dramatic reaction, positive or negative. You just get to keep being the person who stayed consistent when it would have been easier to become bitter. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Is there someone in your life right now whose opinion of you is taking up more space in your head than it deserves? And what would it look like to quietly, steadily stop filling that space and put that energy back into building the life you actually want? Think about it.
Every closed door pointed me toward a better one. Amen. The people who believed in me.
And if this resonated with you, I would genuinely love to hear your story in the comment.
Defend yourself with a smile.